Apple is preparing to do something it hasn't done in over 6 years: bring back the most affordable MacBook in its lineup. For anyone who's been following Apple's laptop releases closely, you'll remember the 12-inch MacBook, a sleek but underpowered machine that disappeared quietly in 2019. Since then, Apple's focus has shifted to MacBook Airs and Pros, but now, all signs point to a bold comeback, and this time, the budget MacBook could be more powerful, more colorful, and more affordable than ever. So, what sparked all this excitement? It started with a single code found deep in Apple's back-end systems, a new identifier labeled MacBook 17,1 at first glance. This may not mean much, but if we trace back Apple's history with device identifiers, it gets interesting. The last MacBook from 2017 used the MacBook 101 label, and Apple's current M4 Mac lineup uses 16.x identifiers. That means jumping to 17.1 lines up perfectly for a next-generation device, one that's possibly built with something very different under the hood. The twist: this upcoming MacBook may not be running on an M-series chip at all. Instead, Apple could be powering this device with the A18 Pro chip, the same one set to debut in the iPhone 16 Pro. You heard that right. A MacBook running macOS on a chip designed for an iPhone. It sounds crazy at first, but when you understand the logic, it actually makes a lot of sense. The A18 Pro is built on cutting-edge architecture. It reportedly performs on par with the M1 in multi-core tasks and even surpasses the M3 in single processing. Not only that, it supports Apple's newest AV1 decoder for better video streaming and comes with extreme power efficiency. That means great performance and longer battery life all inside a lightweight laptop. But this leads to a big question: what about memory? Traditionally, Apple pairs iPhone chips with 8 GB of RAM. Will this new MacBook be stuck with just that? Possibly not. Apple has already shown flexibility when it comes to mixing and matching chips and memory. For example, back in 2020, the Apple Silicon Developer Transition Kit used an A12Z chip with 16 GB of RAM, and more recently, Apple raised the base RAM on new MacBook Airs to 16 GB to better support Apple Intelligence. That makes it entirely possible that this new entry-level MacBook could come with either 8 GB or 16 GB of RAM. For light to moderate users, either would be fine, especially given Apple's unified memory architecture, which makes RAM usage far more efficient than on traditional systems when it comes to design. There's no official confirmation yet, but we can speculate based on Apple's usual patterns. Apple often reuses older chassis designs to cut costs and speed up development. One theory is that they'll bring back the M1 MacBook Air's wedge shape. Another possibility is that it adopts the flatter M2 Air design, but with a few tweaks, perhaps thicker bezels, no notch, or a slightly thinner body. A more creative prediction suggests Apple might revive the ultra-thin look of the old 12-inch MacBook. That would make this new model incredibly portable, perfect for students and light travelers. As for the display, it will likely be a panel with a standard resolution, not the high-end liquid Retina screens you see on MacBook Pros. Apple may even limit the peak brightness to around 400 nits, which is lower than the 500 nits found on the current MacBook Airs. Why? Simple. Apple wants to create clear product separation. Even if the design is similar to more expensive models, little tweaks like brightness caps help keep this MacBook in the budget tier, both in performance and price. Now let's talk about color. Apple is reportedly planning to release this MacBook in 4 playful colors: silver, blue, pink, and yellow. These shades match the ones used on Apple's 10th and 11th gen budget iPads, which is no accident. Apple uses color to signal who the product is for. Bright, fun colors appeal to younger audiences and casual users. It creates a sense of freshness and friendliness that more muted Pro devices lack. This MacBook is meant to be accessible, not intimidating. The colors help tell that story before you even open the box. And speaking of accessibility, let's touch on the name. Some people think this laptop could be called something new, like MacBook, say, or MacBook Lite. But the current rumor points to a much simpler name: just MacBook. Clean, simple, and timeless. It fits Apple's trend of dropping suffixes from their product names, like how the iPhone, say, is just called iPhone in some countries, or how the iPad lineup now includes models like simply iPad and iPad Air. Calling it MacBook would make it feel like the starting point of the entire Mac lineup, and that's exactly what Apple seems to be going for. Ports will likely be minimal. Based on the M1 MacBook Air chassis, we can expect USB-C ports, probably USB 3.2, not Thunderbolt, and a headphone jack. Why no Thunderbolt? The A18 Pro chip doesn't have a built-in Thunderbolt controller. If the design is based on the M2 chassis, Apple might throw in a MagSafe port, too, but don't expect a full suite of Pro-level ports. This is a budget machine, through and through. Storage is another area where Apple may cut a corner quietly. While the base storage will likely be 256 GB, Apple stopped selling 128 GB MacBooks in 2019. There's a catch. Apple might use a single 256 GB NAND chip instead of two 128 GB chips. Why does that matter? Because it would slow down read-write speeds. This exact move hurt the performance of the base M2 MacBook Air, which was noticeably slower than the M1 and M3. For casual users it won't matter much, but for tech reviewers and power users, it's a small but important detail. On the battery front, there's some good news. Thanks to the A18 Pro chip's extreme efficiency, this MacBook could deliver insane battery life, maybe even beyond 18 hours, but Apple will probably tune it down slightly to avoid overshadowing the MacBook Air. They might use a smaller battery to strike a balance between cost, performance, and portability. Still, expect great battery life, especially for a budget machine. To wrap up this first section, it's clear that Apple isn't just reviving an old product, they're redefining what a budget MacBook can be. A machine that's lightweight, colorful, affordable, and powerful enough for most people, whether you're a student or a remote worker or someone looking to get into the Apple ecosystem without spending $1,000. This MacBook could be a perfect entry point, and with a rumored starting price of just $649, it's ready to compete directly with Chromebooks, low-end Windows, laptops, and even high-end tablets. But we're not done yet. In Section 2, we'll talk about release dates, target users, real-world performance, and why this MacBook could be Apple's most important launch in years. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll begin writing Section 2 of the full script.